thought everything was perfect. We had been together for over 5 years, married for 2, and in those first few years, life felt like a fairy tale. We met in college, and right away it felt like fate. The connection was instant, and it seemed like nothing could ever come between us. We made so many plans for the future, for our careers, for our dream home. We were a team. She was my partner in every sense of the word, and I thought nothing would ever tear us apart. Our relationship was like what you'd see in the movies, the dinners out, the vacations, the long nights talking about our hopes and dreams. I used to think that kind of connection was rare. I was convinced I had found my soulmate. She had this way of making everything feel right. She'd listen to my problems, offer advice, and support me no matter what. I always admired her strength, how she balanced everything. Her job, her friends, our life together, and still made me feel like the center of her world. I was proud of the life we built, and it wasn't just about material things. We had love, trust, and a strong foundation. Or at least, I thought we did. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Your lives shape trusts. Before and after the tragedy of life. When you lose them, what do you have? As we started talking about the future, we both agreed on big goals. We wanted a family, a house with a backyard, to travel more. She supported my career ambitions, and I cheered her on with hers. There was always this sense of excitement when we talked about what lay ahead. I would get home from work, and she would be there, smiling, ready to share the day's stories or plan something new. We were in sync in so many ways that it felt like nothing could break us. It felt like we were untouchable. But even with all of this, there were little signs that things weren't as perfect as I thought. They were easy to ignore. She started staying late at work more often, a little too often for my liking. There were nights when she came home and didn't seem as excited to see me. It wasn't like she was distant, but the spark I once felt from her seemed to fade a little. I convinced myself it was just stress from work, or maybe she was going through a phase. I even told myself I was just being paranoid, looking for things that weren't there. I trusted her completely, too completely, I guess. I never questioned her loyalty because why would I? She had never given me a reason to doubt her. Then came the nights when she would go out with friends more frequently. At first I thought nothing of it. She deserved time for herself. She had her own life, just like I did. And I didn't want to be the kind of husband who kept her on a tight leash. But it started becoming a pattern. The late nights out, the odd texts, the sudden "I'll be home later than expected" messages. I asked her once how her night went, and she seemed a bit too quick to tell me that it was fine, almost like she was brushing me off. It was small, but the change was there. Still, I shrugged it off. I thought it was just me overthinking things, imagining things that weren't real. When you're in a relationship like that, you start to think you know everything about the other person. I thought I knew her better than anyone. I thought I had the perfect grasp on our relationship. She was my wife, after all, my confidant, my partner. I was proud of our bond, and I trusted her. But there was something about the way she seemed to slip away when I wasn't looking that I couldn't shake. It wasn't that she was cold, but I started noticing these little changes, subtle but there. I started trying to reassure myself, telling myself it was just the stress of life. Maybe work was tough, or maybe she was just dealing with personal things I didn't know about. I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt, and I told myself that if anything was wrong, she'd tell me. We always talked about everything. That was one of the things I loved most about her openness. She never hesitated to share her thoughts or feelings, and I believed that if something were off, I'd be the first to know. But the more I tried to ignore the growing discomfort, the more it became undeniable. It wasn't just that she was out late or that she seemed distracted when she came home. It was the way she started acting around me. There were moments when she would brush me off, or when I'd try to make plans with her and she'd come up with excuses. I couldn't figure out if it was me or if something had changed in her. I would still tell myself it was nothing. Life had a way of distracting us, I reasoned. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. And then came the night that changed everything. I was going through some papers at home, sorting through bills and other documents. I needed to find something for an upcoming meeting, and in the process, I ended up going through her purse by accident. It wasn't like I was snooping, but I had to move things around to find what I was looking for. That's when I saw it. Her phone. She had left it unlocked, which wasn't unusual. But this time, something inside me nudged me to look at her messages. I wish I had ignored that feeling, but I didn't. What I found, though, will haunt me forever. There were texts between her and Evan, my best friend. The texts weren't just casual. They were flirtatious, teasing, full of inside jokes that only the two of them shared. There was no doubt about it. She was flirting with him. And worse, it went beyond the texting. There were plans, suggestions for when they'd meet up. I felt like the world had stopped. After that scene, it was as if the door had been thrown in my face, and I felt like the world had stopped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just a one-off message. It was a conversation, a secret relationship forming right under my nose. The shock hit me hard. My hands started shaking and I could barely breathe. I felt like I was falling through the floor, like everything I had built with her was a lie. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this, with someone I trusted more than anyone else? The questions raced through my mind and I couldn't make sense of any of it. But the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing how blind I had been to the signs. I had missed everything. The late nights, the distance, the changes in her. All of it had been there and I had ignored it. I had trusted her without question. And now I felt like a fool. It wasn't just that she had cheated. It was that she had done it with my best friend. Evan was supposed to be someone I could count on. We had shared everything over the years, our hopes, fears, and ambitions. He knew everything about me, and I thought I knew everything about him. How could he do this? How could he betray me like this, too? It wasn't just my wife who had shattered my trust. It was Evan. The two people I loved and trusted the most had both betrayed me in the worst possible way. It took a while for the shock to settle. For the longest time, I didn't even know what to do with myself. I kept running the situation over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it. But the more I thought about it, the more the reality hit me. I had been living in a lie, and now I had to face the truth. It all started with little things. At first, it was easy to overlook them, like the way she'd sometimes come home a little later than usual, or how she would be on her phone more than normal. I remember brushing it off as nothing, just the stresses of life, the demands of work, the occasional night out with friends. I didn't think anything of it. I trusted her. I knew her. Or at least, I thought I did. The truth is, I never wanted to question our relationship, and maybe that's where I went wrong. I had this blind faith in her, in us, and that made me turn a blind eye to the signs. She always had a busy schedule, she worked in a fast-paced job, and I knew she was trying to climb the ladder. It was easy for me to justify the late nights or the sudden trips. At first, I didn't even think it was a big deal. I admired her ambition, and I understood that sometimes work needed to come first. So when she came home late one evening after another work event, I didn't think much of it. But then it started happening more frequently. It wasn't just the late nights, it was her increasing distance. She seemed a little more distracted, a little more distant when we were together. The spark I used to feel when we were around each other started to fade. We'd have dinner together, but it didn't feel the same. Conversations felt forced, and the intimacy we once shared seemed to be slipping away. The worst part was, I didn't even know how to address it. How do you bring up something like that without sounding paranoid or like you're accusing someone of something without any real evidence? I kept telling myself that it was probably just a phase, that she was stressed, or maybe even a little overwhelmed by everything. I didn't want to overreact, so I convinced myself to let it go. But even though I was trying to ignore it, the uneasy feeling in my stomach didn't go away. It was like something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. I kept hoping it was nothing, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. One night, I got home earlier than expected. I had finished some work I'd been putting off and decided to surprise her by getting dinner ready. I thought it'd be nice to reconnect, maybe spark some of that closeness we used to have. But when I walked into the kitchen, I noticed something odd. Her phone was on the counter, screen facing up, which wasn't like her at all. She usually kept it in her bag, always mindful of her privacy. But there it was, sitting there almost taunting me. My heart started racing, and the unease I had been trying to ignore came rushing back. I tried to calm myself down, but my curiosity got the better of me. I picked up her phone. At first, I thought I'd just check the time, but then something inside me urged me to look at her messages. It felt wrong, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't expect what I found. The messages between her and Evan, my best friend, were right there in front of me. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke or harmless flirting. After all, they were friends too, right? They had known each other for years, just like I had. But as I kept scrolling, it became clear that what I was looking at was far from harmless. The texts weren't just friendly. There was an unmistakable tension in the conversation. Texts weren't just friendly. There was an unmistakable tension in the conversation. The playful teasing felt off, almost too intimate. As I kept reading, I found more and more evidence of a connection that went beyond friendship. They had been talking about meeting up, planning to see each other outside of the times they spent together with me. I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten as I read each message, each line. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was seeing. Could this really be happening? I tried to convince myself that I was reading too much into it, but the words on the screen didn't lie. At that moment, I felt like the world had come crashing down around me. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do or where to turn. There were so many emotions flooding me all at once: anger, confusion, disbelief. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, like my whole life had been a lie. How could she do this? How could my wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, betray me with my best friend? Evan wasn't just anyone. He was someone I had known for years. Someone I had confided in, someone I thought I could always count on. To see the two of them laughing, joking, making plans together, it felt like a betrayal in the deepest sense. My mind kept going back to all those little signs I had ignored, all the times I had convinced myself it was nothing. Now it all made sense, and I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. I finally understood what had been bothering me from the very beginning, and I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. I put the phone down, my hands trembling. I couldn't stop thinking about everything. It was like a cloud of anger and hurt was slowly consuming me, and I couldn't escape it. I thought about confronting her right then and there, but I was frozen. I didn't know how to approach the situation. What was I supposed to say? How could I even begin to explain what I had just discovered? The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks, and I wasn't sure how to process it. I couldn't even wrap my head around how everything had changed so suddenly. My mind kept replaying moments in our relationship, things she had said, the way she had acted, things I should have noticed before, and I was filled with a sense of regret. I felt stupid for not seeing it, stupid for trusting her so completely. The worst part was the guilt. I felt guilty for looking through her phone, guilty for invading her privacy. But then I realized it wasn't me who had crossed the line. It wasn't me who had betrayed someone. I had trusted her, and she had taken that trust and thrown it away. I tried to calm myself down, but it was hard. I couldn't escape the feeling of being blindsided, of being taken for a fool. I never thought this would happen to me. I never thought the woman I loved would do this. And to do it with Evan? That was a punch to the gut I wasn't prepared for. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the phone, trying to process the information in front of me. It didn't feel real. My whole life felt like it was shattering around me. The trust I had in her and us was gone in an instant. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind. How had I missed the signs? How could she have lied to me, not just once, but over and over again? The truth was, I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that everything had changed. And I didn't know where to go from here. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just ignore it. I couldn't keep pretending that nothing was wrong. I had to face the truth no matter how painful it was. I had to confront her. But even as I thought about that, I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it would destroy everything I thought I knew about our relationship. But I couldn't keep living in denial. I had to confront the reality of what had happened, even if it meant facing the hardest thing I had ever had to do. I confronted her. Of course, she denied everything at first. It felt like I had just opened a floodgate of emotions that neither of us were ready for. I stood there, holding her phone, the evidence of everything that had been happening right under my nose. My heart was racing, my mind was spinning, and I wasn't sure what to say first. She had no idea that I knew. She had no idea that I had seen everything, that I had been living in this suffocating silence, this gnawing pit of confusion and hurt. I wanted to scream, but I kept my composure, trying to process what I was about to do. I asked her directly, and the question hung in the air like a heavy weight. Is there something going on between you and Evan? She looked at me, her eyes widening, as if the question caught her off guard. The pause between us felt like it stretched on forever, and for a moment I almost thought she was going to say something to make it all better. But then the denial started. She told me that it wasn't what it seemed, that the texts were just playful and harmless. She said there was nothing to worry about, that I was just overthinking things. She even said that I was being paranoid, that I shouldn't jump to conclusions. But I wasn't jumping to conclusions. I wasn't imagining things. I had the proof right in front of me, and she knew it. I didn't know how to feel in that moment. The shock was still there, but now there was this overwhelming sense of betrayal, and I could feel the anger building inside me. How could she be so calm, so collected, as if everything was fine? Didn't she understand the gravity of what I had found? Didn't she realize that she had just shattered everything we had built together? But as she continued to deny, I felt a kind of numbness wash over me. It was like I was no longer even a part of the conversation. I was just standing there, watching her weave lie after lie, desperately trying to cover up something that couldn't be hidden anymore. It wasn't just her lies that hurt, it was the way she tried to manipulate me, to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. She tried to make me doubt myself, as if I couldn't trust my own eyes. She said I was being unfair, that I was accusing her without reason. But I didn't need to reason with her anymore. I had already seen enough. I had already been through enough. I had given her so many chances to come clean, to be honest with me, but she chose to hide the truth. The more she spoke, the more I realized just how deep the betrayal went. I asked her about the messages between her and Evan, about the plans they had made to meet up, and that was when the cracks in her story started to show. She hesitated, stumbling over her words, and for a brief second I saw the guilt in her eyes. She couldn't hide it anymore. She had been caught, and there was no way to twist the truth. Finally, she admitted it. She admitted that there was more to their relationship than she had let on, that they had been seeing each other behind my back. The confession was like a punch to the stomach. I felt the wind get knocked out of me, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I could stand. It was all true. Everything I had feared, everything I had suspected, it was all right there in front of me. And I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered world. She explained it away like it was some kind of mistake, like she hadn't meant for things to go so far, but I wasn't buying it. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something that just happened. This was a deliberate choice she had made, over and over again. She had chosen him. She had chosen to be with my best friend, to betray me in the worst way possible. The fact that it was Evan, the one person I had trusted with everything, made it even worse. She could have chosen anyone, but she chose him. That hit me like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't stop the flood of emotions that came rushing in. I was angry, hurt, confused, and above all, heartbroken. The man I had called my best friend had done the unthinkable, and so had she. I asked her how long it had been going on. She tried to downplay it, saying it wasn't as serious as it seemed, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. The truth was, it had been going on for longer than I wanted to admit. She didn't know it, but I had pieced together the timeline in my head as she spoke. The late nights, the sudden absences, the excuses. It all made sense now. It wasn't just one mistake. This had been a pattern, a series of decisions she had made over time. And each time, I had been kept in the dark. I kept thinking to myself that if I had paid attention, if I had asked the right questions, maybe I could have prevented this. But the truth was, I couldn't have. She had already made her choices, and no amount of asking would change that. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal of her, though. It was the fact that Evan, my best friend, the person I had trusted with my deepest secrets, was involved. The more I thought about it, the more my anger swelled. How could he do this to me? How could he be so heartless, so selfish, to go behind my back and have an affair with my wife? The man who had stood by me, who had celebrated with me, and who had promised to always have my back. He was the one who had broken that trust. He was the one who had stabbed me in the back. I thought about all the times we'd hung out together, all the laughs we'd shared, all the moments when I thought we were brothers. How could he look me in the eye and do this? It didn't make sense. As she stood there, trying to explain herself, I felt like I was sinking. Every word she said felt like a knife twisting deeper into me. There was no way to undo what had been done. No way to erase the images in my mind of them together. No way to take back the trust that had been broken. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I couldn't see her as the person I had loved so deeply. She wasn't that woman anymore. She was a stranger to me now, someone who had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. And as much as I tried to make sense of it, the truth was that I couldn't. The confrontation ended with her apologizing, of course. She begged for forgiveness, said that she didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. But I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. I couldn't look at her and pretend like nothing had changed. There was no going back. The damage had been done, and all the apologies in the world couldn't fix what had been broken. I didn't know what to do after that. Part of me wanted to leave right away, to walk out and never look back. But there was another part of me that was still holding on to the memories of what we once had. I couldn't shake that part of me, the one that still hoped things could somehow go back to normal. But deep down, I knew it was over. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine. I couldn't live with someone who had done this to me. I couldn't live with someone who had lied, who had betrayed not only me but also the foundation of everything we had built together. The decision wasn't easy, but in the end, I knew I had no other choice but to face the truth and walk away. I didn't even have to say a word. That was when I realized the days after the confrontation were a blur. It felt like I was living in some sort of limbo, stuck between the past I thought I had and the reality I now had to face. I kept replaying everything in my mind, over and over again. The betrayal, the lies, the way she had looked me in the eyes and told me that everything was fine, when it was anything but. I couldn't escape it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her and Evan, together, laughing, smiling. I couldn't unsee it, and it was suffocating me. I wasn't sleeping well, and when I did manage to sleep, the dreams were even worse. I'd wake up with my heart racing, covered in sweat, thinking I was still in the middle of the confrontation, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. It felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, and I couldn't find a way to come up for air. There were moments when I would catch myself reaching for my phone, ready to text her, to reach out in some way, but I would stop myself every time. What was there to say? What could she possibly say to make it better? The truth was, nothing would ever make it better. Nothing could erase what had happened. Nothing could undo the damage she had done. I had trusted her. I had loved her. And in an instant, that trust had been shattered. I couldn't just go back to how things were. I couldn't pretend like everything was okay. I kept thinking about how everything had seemed so perfect before. How we had been a team. How we had built something together. And now, all of it felt like a lie. I tried to keep myself busy to distract myself from the overwhelming feelings that kept creeping in. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the reality of what had happened. I spent hours on the couch, just staring at the wall, trying to process the emotions that were all over the place. Some moments I was angry, and other times I felt a deep, aching sadness that seemed to weigh on my chest. It was like there was a constant pressure, a feeling of being crushed under the weight of it all. I had never imagined that I would be in this position. I had never imagined that the woman I had married, the person I had trusted above anyone else, would betray me in such a painful, personal way. The worst part was that it wasn't just her that had hurt me, it was Evan too. The realization that my best friend had been involved in this betrayal was something I couldn't wrap my head around. How could he do this? How could he look me in the eye all these years and pretend like everything was normal, knowing what he was doing behind my back? The anger I felt toward him was almost more intense than what I felt toward her. I felt completely blindsided by both of them, and that sense of betrayal cut deeper than anything else. It wasn't long before I made the decision to leave. I didn't want to be in the house anymore, surrounded by the memories of what had once been. It felt like every corner of that place held a reminder of what I had lost, what had been stolen from me. I couldn't look at anything without feeling the weight of it all, so I packed my things and left. It was a hard thing to do. It felt like I was walking away from everything I had known, everything I thought I had, but deep down I knew it was the right thing. Staying would only prolong the pain, and I couldn't live like that. I couldn't stay in a place where the foundation of everything I had trusted had been ripped apart. It caused me to go down a path that I later realized I probably shouldn't have. The first few days after I left were some of the loneliest of my life. I stayed in a small apartment, far from the place that had once been my home. The silence in that apartment was deafening. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I kept thinking about what I could have done differently. Could I have seen the signs sooner? Could I have stopped it before it got to this point? But in the end, I knew there was nothing I could have done. She had made her choices, and so had Evan. And now I had to live with the consequences of those choices. It was hard not to reach out to her. There were moments when I wanted to hear her voice, when I wanted to know if she regretted what she had done, if she was truly sorry. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't keep asking for answers that would never come. I couldn't keep searching for closure in a place where there was none. She had already given me all the answers I needed the moment she admitted to the affair. And this was only the beginning of the agony I still felt. There was no excuse for what she had done, no justification for betraying my trust like that. And the worst part was, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. She had chosen Evan over me, and that hurt more than anything. I started to focus on myself, trying to pick up the pieces of my life. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the weight of everything was too much to bear. But slowly, I started to find a way forward. I started going to therapy, talking about what had happened, trying to make sense of the mess that my life had become. It helped, but it didn't take away the pain. It didn't erase the betrayal, the heartache, or the feeling of being completely blindsided by the people I had loved and trusted most. I didn't talk to her for a long time after that. There was no reason to. I didn't need her apologies or her explanations. I didn't need her to tell me that she was sorry. The truth was, I didn't want to hear it. It felt hollow, empty, and I wasn't sure I could trust her words anymore. She had shattered everything that had once been good between us, and no amount of apologies could ever fix that. I started to distance myself from the people who had been close to her too. I couldn't bring myself to see the friends who had known about the affair. I couldn't talk to the people who had been complicit in all of this. It was too painful. It felt like they had all turned their backs on me, and I couldn't trust anyone the same way again. The hardest part of it all was realizing that I had to let go. I had to let go of the life I had imagined for myself, the future I had planned with her. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I missed the old us, when I missed the love we had shared. But I knew I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't real anymore. I had to move forward, even if it felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind. The process of healing was slow. It was painful. and there were times when I felt like I was never going to get past it. But with time, I began to rebuild. I began to remember who I was before her, before all the lies and betrayal. I started to see that I was capable of moving on, that I was strong enough to let go and find happiness again, even if it meant walking away from everything I had once believed in. It wasn't an easy journey, and I still had moments where I wondered if I had made the right decision. But in the end, I knew that leaving was the only way I could heal. I had to move forward even if I had to do it alone. The truth was, I was better off without them. As the weeks went on, I found myself slowly coming to terms with the reality of what had happened. At first, everything felt raw and painful. Every day felt like I was walking through a fog, trying to make sense of the pieces of my life that had been scattered. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I couldn't shake the anger, the sense of betrayal that clung to me like a shadow. But over time, I started to realize something. I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. I had been through something unimaginable, something that most people would have folded under. But I was still here. I was still standing, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone take my sense of self away from me. I began to focus on myself more. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to worry about anyone else. I didn't have to cater to her, to try to fix things that weren't meant to be fixed. It felt freeing, even though it was difficult. I started picking up hobbies that I had let fall by the wayside, things I had forgotten about when I was wrapped up in the whirlwind of our relationship. I started going to the gym again, something that had always helped clear my mind. I took long walks, spent time alone, and gradually, I started to feel like myself again. Slowly, I started to reclaim the parts of me that I had lost in the years I had spent with her, building a life that I thought was going to be forever. At first, this new life in Florida built a life that I thought was going to be forever. But as I rebuilt, there were still moments of doubt. The wounds didn't heal as quickly as I wanted them to, and there were nights when the pain would creep back in, reminding me of the trust that had been broken, of the love that had turned into a lie. I couldn't shake the images of her with him, of the betrayal that had come from both of them. Every time I thought I was past it, I would be hit with a reminder, an old photo, a memory, or something that felt too much like her. I couldn't completely let go of the hurt, and part of me didn't want to. It was as though I was holding on to the anger, because without it, I would have to face the emptiness left by what had happened. It was strange, though there were moments of clarity. There were times when I would catch myself thinking about the person I used to be, the man I had been before all of this. I realized that I had let the relationship define me in so many ways. I had based so much of my self-worth on the idea of us, of being part of something that I thought was unbreakable. But in the end, it was breakable. In the end, it was all just a fragile illusion. And I had to accept that. I had to accept that things weren't going to go back to the way they were, that I couldn't turn back the clock and undo the mistakes she had made, the choices she had made. I spent more time thinking about the future, about what I wanted for myself moving forward. It wasn't an easy thing to do. The future had seemed so uncertain for a long time. But with each passing day, I found a little more strength. I began to believe that I deserved better, that I wasn't bound to a past that had been stolen from me. The betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it didn't have to define the rest of my life. I had the power to write my own story from this point forward. In the midst of all this, there was a moment when I had to face her again. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I knew it had to happen. I needed closure, not just for me, but for the part of me that still couldn't quite let go. It was time to stop avoiding it. Time to stop pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I knew that I couldn't keep running from the reality of what had happened. So I reached out to her, but I kept it short and simple. I didn't want to drag things out, didn't want to reopen old wounds. I just needed to get the words out, to finally speak my truth. When I saw her again, it felt different. She looked different, like someone who had been through their own version of hell. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the weight of what had happened, and for a brief second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then the anger came back. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her bed and now she had to lie in it. She apologized again, tried to explain herself, but the words didn't matter. The damage was done. I didn't need her apology to heal. I didn't need her to explain anything to me. It was too late for that. We talked for a while, but it wasn't the same. There was no warmth between us anymore, no connection. There was just a coldness, a distance that had been put there by her actions. I could see that she was genuinely remorseful, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change the fact that I had been hurt, that the person I had trusted most in the world had betrayed me. There was no going back from that, and as much as I wanted to find a way to forgive her, to find some sense of peace in the whole situation, I realized that it wasn't possible. Not right now. Maybe not ever. After we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The chapter with her was closed, and there was no going back. I had said my piece, and I could finally move forward, even if it was just a little bit at a time. I wasn't going to let her keep me trapped in the past. I wasn't going to keep holding on to something that was never going to be what I had imagined it to be. It was strange, though there was a part of me that still missed the idea of what we had. I missed the life I thought we were going to have together, the future that we had talked about. But then I remembered everything that had happened, and I realized that I couldn't let those feelings blind me to the reality of who she had become. She wasn't the person I thought she was. She wasn't the woman I had loved. She was someone else now, someone I couldn't recognize. The hardest part, I think, was coming to terms with the fact that I had given so much of myself to someone who didn't value it. I had invested years of my life into something that wasn't real, and that hurt more than anything. But as time went on, I realized that I could rebuild. I could create a new life for myself, one that was mine and mine alone. I didn't need her or Evan to define who I was. I had my own worth, and I was going to reclaim it. Slowly but surely, I started to feel the weight of the betrayal lift off my shoulders. I started to find peace in knowing that I had made the right decision, that I had walked away from a toxic situation. The future wasn't as scary as it once seemed. In fact, it felt full of possibilities, full of opportunities to rebuild and grow. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that things could get better, that I could find happiness again, without anyone else's lies hanging over me. It wasn't an easy journey, but I knew that I was on the right path. The healing wasn't quick, and it wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that was enough for me. I had survived the worst of it, and now I was learning how to live again.